Hi, this is Eric from Cafe Watercolor. Thank you for joining me in a new painting demo. The days are getting colder, so I hope you staying warm, stay safe, and stay healthy. So I haven't done a portrait demo for quite a while, so I think this is a good chance for me to do that. Portrait has always been a wonderful subject that I like to work with because you get to focus on the subject, you get to focus on the person's face, and sometimes you might include a little bit, maybe hands or whatever it is, but mostly the face. And there's this precious feeling and precious quality when you try to do that, when you're just focusing on a specific face rather than a big scenery, which I also like, but portrait always give me this special feeling. So I start out with a portrait, especially for this one, I start out with quite a tight drawing actually. I did quite a bit of the structure. So as you can see, even though my pencil line are very, very light, but it is a pretty structure heavy drawing, I should say. And the most reason is because that just the lighting and the structure of her face is very, very obvious, very prominent. And after I build the structure of the face, I start to go in with a mechanical pencil just to get a little bit more detail out of it. So I draw a little bit darker, but I also mark out the landmarks that is going to be important for me to reference from. Most of the structural lines are going to be gone. I'm going to erase those later on. So the structures are mostly just for me to get familiar with the subject and really help me to get a read of the three-dimensional quality of her face. I said it many times, we are trying to interpret a three-dimensional object, three-dimensional subject on a two-dimensional surface. So if we want to paint a believable painting, in this case a believable portrait, it's very important that we understand the structure of the subject that we're looking at. And in many cases, we need to bring that out even more obvious than the photo itself. Because when you're looking at a photo, you have the perception that that is a three-dimensional object because it is photographed. But for drawing and for painting, unless you show the viewer that you understand the structure and you suggest those, they're not going to read as three-dimensional as it could be. So I start to erase some of the construction lines and just leave out the darker landmarks. So understand the facial structures and the proportion of the face is quite important when you're doing a portrait. You can try your best to eyeball and try to match everything you see on the photo and try to copy that to your painting. But if your understanding of human face stays at a two-dimensional surface, you're not able to bring out that lively three-dimensional quality out of it. So whenever I see a student who's trying to do a portrait but lack the understanding of human facial structures and the proportion, it always turns out looking kind of odd and a little bit cartoonish even because it looks a little bit flat and not very believable. And that doesn't mean that you need to paint realistic looking portrait. Charles Reed is one of my favorite portrait artists and his portrait is not realistic at all. It's very stylized and I actually learned a lot of it from him. But he clearly has understanding of facial structure, so everything he does looks like a personal choice rather than somebody who lacking the understanding of facial structure and proportion. So here comes the first wash, and as you can see, the first wash is all about just the color and the color of the light. I can suggest a little bit of the structure here, but this is really not the point of the first wash. There's not really a place where I want to leave my face completely white, not even a highlight. So I just did an overall wash, even onto the hair because the hair is going to be darker and you can cover that up. So the first wash is dry. Now I go into the second wash and start painting the eye. And I'm going to paint that eye value out, connect that to the structure. So the eye and eye socket. And whenever I paint out a shape, I need to think about where it ends and where I'm going to soften the edges. So I use a clean damp brush to soften the edges as needed. And if you're curious what brush I'm using right now, this is Trekell This is a synthetic Kolinsky brush. It's honestly the best synthetic Kolinsky brush that I've ever used. It holds a very, very good point, and the hairs are long enough that I'm able to do some nice big strokes with a small brush, and it's honestly very cheap compared to real hair Kolinsky brush. Check out the link down below if you're interested. So I continue my second wash, modeling the face. I like to say modeling because when I'm painting portrait, it actually feels like sculpting because I need to bring out the structure of the face. So I paint the eye socket, and I connect that shape to the cheekbone, and now I connect that shape to the mouth and the chin. Connection is still very important even doing portrait. So I'm connecting that to the nose. The nose is a lot hotter. I use quite a bit more red because that color will project the nose out. So this will further helps the three-dimensional quality to the portrait. And start to do the lips. So I put the hot spot on the upper lip, and I just bring that shape out to the side. So this is the way you can suggest different weights in the same shape. Here is the corner of the lips. Again, a little dark spot. And while it is wet, you just soften the shape. Now I paint the shape of the chin and bring that down onto her neck. So one thing you might notice is that I purposely left out some hard edges. And there's a reason for that because some hard edges can actually enhance the structure of the face. One of the mistakes I see students do multiple times is that they try to soften everything they see. And it is true, you don't see hard edges on the human face. No matter how bony their face looks, they still don't have like a sharp edge like her cheekbone right here. But this is the case that you want to paint what you know, paint what you understand, not just what you see. So if you understand the structure of the face, you can leave out some hard edges just trying to convey your understanding of the facial structure. And the viewer is going to see it, they're going to feel it. So showing your understanding of the subject is way more important than just try to paint everything you see. It also makes painting more fun for me as well because I get to do some decision making instead of just trying to copy everything I see like a copy machine. So I'm painting her clothes. It's going to be very simple because even though in the photo there is some flowers and prints on her clothes, I want to keep the clothes simple. Because number one, I'm lazy, I don't want to paint all that flowers. And number two, I want the focus to be on her face. So now the second wash is dry, I can go in and start to paint a little bit more detail, parts that's a little bit darker, and make things just a little bit more interesting. And like I said, complete the value range. So even though this is not a scenery painting, a lot of the concept still applies here. So just a little bit more details, a little bit more dark on her nostril, the eyelid, places like that. But it's very important that you still try to think about shapes rather than individual little details, dots and lines. So for the nostril, I did paint them darker, but I also bring that shape out and fade those out so they don't look like this dot on the face. So same thing for the lips. So I darken the corner of the lips, but I also connect that to the bottom lips and the shadow of the chin. And the purpose of darken several things are just trying to bring out more value as well as to enhance the structure of the face more. So sometimes if you think that it's not going to help the overall portrait, then might as well not paint it. And that's the hard lesson to learn. Usually I try to paint too much. When I see a lot of information on the photograph, I want to copy everything I see. But then we just went over how we should just paint what we understand, what we know, instead of everything we see. So this is always a learning process for me as well. Sometimes I just couldn't resist looking at some beautiful details in the photo, and I want to bring that over to my painting as well. But that's not always the wisest decision. So I'm starting to paint some hair. And she has darker brown hair, so this is going to help the light to pop out even better. So I start from the edge of her face. And the hair right here serves the purpose of bringing out the contrast of the light. So I'm not going to focus too much detail on the hair itself. I'm not going to paint a bunch of hair strand and stuff. I treat it as one single shape with a little variety of value and color. Also think about the connection between the hair and the head, because hair grows from the head. So if you separate them too much, it's going to feel like it's like a piece of shape sticking on top of the head, and that doesn't look good. So I paint a little bit more shadows, a little bit more structure on her body. And you might notice that I completely ignore her left hand that's resting on her wrist. And the reason is that I think that's not going to help this painting, even though it looks pretty nice. And I just think that it's just not really going to help, and it's going to be very hard for me to pull that off too, because there's a lot of foreshortening. So I just suggest a little bit of the wrist of her right hand. So maybe it looks like she's resting her right arm on the surface or something. And I think that's enough for me. Adding a little bit background so it transitions from the hair to the white background a little bit better, so it's not a hard cutout. And here is the finished painting. I hope you enjoy this portrait. There are quite a few students ask me if I will ever do a portrait painting class. I'm definitely considering it, but if I'm going to do it, I'm actually going to start from the very basic of facial structure and everything else. So if you're interested, definitely leave a comment down below so I know how many people are interested. Thank you, and I will see you guys next time.